Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much again for joining us. As always, I'm happy to have you, and I can't wait to introduce our guest to you. But before we do that, I'd like to thank some folks that we always thank. We'd like to thank brassandwinds.com. These are our friends when we need brass or wind instruments of any kind for our students, for our teachers, or for our friends. Brassandwinds.com is a Quinn the Eskimo company, and we recommend you give them a call. We are Willow Music, formerly the Grant Park Academy of the Arts, and we offer highly qualified professional instruction in violin, piano, trumpet, trombone, saxophone, guitar, voice, and we would love to have you join us. And if you would like to be a part of our community at Truer MU, we would love to have you. We have opportunities for you to study jazz as a beginner online through video, and also to take part in our online community. So we'll talk more about that then. Now it's my pleasure, without further ado, to introduce to you a gentleman who is a jazz musician and a representative of jazz all over the country and working towards all over the world. His name is Mr. Joe Alterman. Joe, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Now, just to introduce folks to who you are a jazz pianist. You're also the director of Narananan, and we're going to talk about that later. You have performed at the Kennedy Center, at Lincoln Center, Birdland, and Blue Note, where you've frequently opened for Ramsey Lewis. You have 4 albums out. Most recent one was released in 2018 called More Cornbread. And the reason I like having you on my show is because you've done something very special with jazz. You have inspired the previous generation of jazz musicians. That is unusual. You know, it's often, often something that you see where you can inspire the next generation or your current generation, but you've got these older folks excited. How did you do that?
It's a good question. Well, first, I'm just honored to know these people. Thank you for the kind words. Seriously, I've just been really lucky in that I guess so. I grew up here in Atlanta, but I moved to New York when I was 18 to go to NYU and to study music and jazz in particular, jazz piano in particular, and really, I really just wanted to learn from the pianists who most inspired me. And after, a few years, I was lucky that I was getting to open for quite a few of them at the Blue Note. And, it's really, I don't know what it is, but I've managed to form really special and different, unique friendships with many of my heroes, older heroes in the jazz world. And I'm just always surprised when they call and say they like something I did or whatever. And I mean, it is kind of shocking when they'll say something's inspirational or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how I did it other than, we are real friends. And I think we both, there's a mutual respect there.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but
Well,
I don't know. I got
I,
lucky.
I don't think so. I think you can get lucky once, but I mean, let's talk about some of the people that have been excited by you. Great jazz critic Nat Hentoff, Dick Cavett, Ramsey Lewis, Ahmad Jamal. These are people who will vouch for you and talk about, your playing. There must be something more to it than luck. What's going on?
Well, I know, I know that Ramsey has referred to my music as happy, serious music, and I like that. And I think with all of these people, especially Ahmad Jamal, he was one of the first people that made me see this or made me realize why he was even talking to me. Was that he told me this was that there was an enthusiasm in me that he I remember the first bit of advice he ever gave me was keep your enthusiasm. It's necessary. And he's never said I like you because you're enthusiastic. He said that, which tells me that I am. um, but I know that these people appreciate my joy because I mean I'm joyful at the piano and when I'm not at the piano, and I think they feel that, and I think they can feel also how much I admire their work and respect what they do. I mean, there's many times when I remind Ramsey or Les McCann, for example, of a recording that I love of theirs. They say, I never recorded that. And I say, well, you want to bet? I really know their work.
Yeah, yeah. And I think people appreciate it, especially these days when jazz musicians are kind of known to only a few. They really appreciate somebody that has taken the time not only to listen, but to study their work and to talk to them. They need you as much as you need them.
And I think too, and just getting to know some of them, I realized that we kind of feel certain music in the same way. Like, if you came to my show, you probably think he just loves soul jazz, or and you'd probably think the same thing if you saw a Ramsey Lewis show. But when me and Ramsey talk about music and share music, we're sharing like, Sinatra ballads, and I think I think there's just something. I don't know what it is, but I just can tell with each person there's something that we both feel special about in the music. If that makes
Hmm.
sense. Really.
Well, it does. Now, I've heard your playing, and we're going to hear some of your playing later. And I've also heard a lot of Ahmad Jamal's playing. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the two of you are very different. He feels free. While I wouldn't call him, as avant-garde as they get, he definitely takes his own path. He believes in silence, and stopping suddenly and going crazy directions. And your playing is much more traditional.
Mm-hmm.
The same seed may be there, but what do you think you have in common with Ahmad?
Um, well, I know, truthfully, basically, when I was a kid, I started piano lessons. I asked my parents for piano lessons. I immediately hated it, wanted to quit. They wouldn't let me quit. And so I'm basically taking from like 5 to 12 without liking it. And then my dad showed me an Oscar Peterson recording. And that kind of was like, oh, I like that. But it wasn't until I heard Ahmad Jamal's version of Like Someone in Love from Live at the Black Hawk, I think it's like 1958 or so, that I thought it really hit me. Like Oscar Peterson stuff hit me in terms of I love this and I love the sound of it, I love the feel of it. But I remember Ahmad stuff kind of hit me like maybe if I practice, I might sound like that if I really. It felt like there was something personal in it. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
and I think I don't really. I mean, I guess it depends. Throughout my whole journey, there's been times when I've just imitated him a lot more than I you know do or whatever. But I think the thing that we really do have in common is that we're not really bebop piano players.
Mhm.
I know he spent a lot of time in Chicago, and I know just like Ramsey Lewis is from Chicago, and we talk a lot about what we have in common being from Chicago and being from Atlanta. And Ramsey kind of expressed this to me, and I kind of agree with it. Is that he said he's glad he grew up in Chicago because in Chicago, unlike New York at the time, you were encouraged to be influenced by all kinds of music, not just bebop. And
Ah.
he knows, if he had been in New York at the time, there would be a lot of pressure to only be influenced by bebop. And so I think a lot of that I relate to that being from Atlanta and getting into bluegrass music before I got into jazz. But I
Uh-huh.
think if you listen to a lot of Ahmad's recordings from Chicago before he moved to New York, especially, you really hear a lot of different influences,
Yes.
I really identify with that. And I love melody too. The other thing, and I don't mean to go on and on about this, but the one thing I love about Ahmad, and the first thing that probably besides the little tickles he would do to, I don't know what they're called, that's what I call it, but was that I didn't know the melodies to the songs that I was hearing him play, but I would be humming the entire recording. So to me, everything was like one long melody, and I love that. It wasn't necessarily here's definitely the melody, here's the solo, we're back to the melody. It was like here's the melody, here's more melody, here's more melody. What's the actual melody? Because it's so melodic. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I do. Yeah, I think Ahmad Jamal, among pianists, he's less likely to just play the tune and then solo and then play the tune at the end in that typical jazz style. He's more likely to go off his inspiration immediately.
And I think we're both, truthfully, the last, I don't mean to go on about, but I think
Notes.
this is an important point. Is me, uh, Ramsey, and Ahmad. I'm sure pretty much our biggest influence on the piano, all three of us, is Errol Garner,
Yeah.
and I think that might be it even more in terms of when I hear Errol Garner, it's really hearing like a shout chorus in a big band every chorus.
Right. Right.
So I think, I mean, I know there's a lot of differences between all of our playings, but I think I like to think like that. Like to me, a Count Basie shout chorus, every chorus is like the dream, the dream tune.
Yeah, well, Errol Garner is one of my heroes as well, and one of the things that, for me, I put him in a special place away from all the other pianists, even though he is part of a tradition. But there's a certain the capacity for joy in Errol Garner's playing is unmatched, and I mean, of course, nobody's going to speak against Art Tatum at all ever. Oscar Peterson, Bud Powell, any of these people are fantastic, and I love them all. But with Errol, somehow the joy seems more important than him. And
Hmm.
that's the thing I pick up on.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of like, because to me, Errol's like, I mean, he's definitely a jazz piano player, but he's definitely also like in this whole other category. Like, I wouldn't want to call him a song stylist, but in many ways he really is, and that's a I mean that in like a very complimentary
Uh-huh.
way, not in like a cocktail piano way. To me, it's, he just brings out the melody. It makes it so much more than we ever could have thought it could have
And does crazy things with it at the beginning and the end too.
been.
Crazy things. Like
Oh yeah.
he's like an avant-garde pianist stuffed into a very conservative box. It's a very strange combo.
I love the videos of him watching him play, because he looks as surprised by what's happening as we do. But I'd love to see more of like some of those improvised intros on video, just to see what is, where's this coming from. They could be compositions to themselves many times.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that with you. You play in a very traditional style. Do you feel there's room for you to? Where do you like to push? Do you like to stay safe, or do you like to push? And are you pushing in a way that maybe is hard to pick up?
Well, I guess, I mean, truthfully, like, I've changed a little bit since that recording, which was recorded in 2017. I think, I mean, I definitely gravitate more towards blue, what would be called traditional stuff, but I wouldn't say that I'm playing it safe when I play, or I'm just playing what, I guess what I'm trying to play what I hear in my head, but it's not like, in terms of, tradition, or I'm not saying there's never any like, uh, uh, I have to play this, or, there's no set, what I'm trying to say. It's not.
Right, you're not playing something that you figured out ahead of time.
Right, right. To me, I just kind of hear it like that. If someone said something, and I don't, I mean, I listen to all sorts of jazz piano, and especially the stuff I've kind of been playing the past few years. I mean, I don't know if someone else would hear a really modern player in me ever. But it's I've it's kind of like I've absorbed a lot, but for some reason my playing is like, I'm influenced by like I kind of skipped having an influence of like, the Keith Jarrett, and but I mean, I can tell you where that influence comes into my playing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to, I guess this, I mean, maybe I'm not making any sense. But
Well, I'm sure that everybody's dying to hear you play at this point. Are you? Would you be willing to play for us?
yeah, sure. I just got to get to the piano.
Okay, take us with you.
Yes. Let's well, we're getting there.
This is exciting. Run with Joe Alterman.
Let's see. Is this okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Great. I'll move something. So I was thinking, would you want to hear something original, or something that people would know?
Start with a standard, and we can do the original next.
Okay, sounds good. I'll do Memories of You. Cool.
Yes.
UB Blake.
Great.
You hear
We can. Of course, Zoom is going to do its thing, but we'll get what we can get.
it okay?
All right. Thank you. Fun to listen to and to watch. Yeah.
I play just as much as my feet.
That's great. Well, so Memories of You, that's really terrific. UB Blake tune. Not one I play often enough. I really like that. And great feel there, and you know, moving in between the beats, and it's just wonderful. Ted, do you want to play us one of yours?
I'd be happy to. Do you want to hear one of mine?
I want to hear one of yours.
I'll do this is called Georgia's Sunset.
Okay.
It's you know, to me, that album, More Cornbread, I was thinking, how do you say Southern jazz without saying Southern jazz? This is
Georgia Sunset, Joe Alterman. Georgia Sunset, Joe Alterman. Great performances. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah. So is jazz set now, do you think, or is it still growing?
I think it's. Wait, do you mind if I go back downstairs?
Take us with you.
I'll take you with me. Yes. That's a
Let me be careful. I can get downstairs.
Yeah, you don't want to trip in the middle of the interview and fall. This would be our last interview if you did that. We killed Joe Alterman.
It'd be good for the views.
It would. We could get millions of views. Yeah.
We could try that walk again in a bit. What was the question?
Is jazz done growing? Is it set? I mean, do we really have everything there's going to be in it, or is there somewhere for it to go? What's going on?
I think it's always, I guess I feel like the more I've talked to people about this, I feel like there's two fields of thought. I think one is that it's not, and that, a lot of the stuff that we hear should be, more traditional. Or there's the other school, which is there's a place for everything, and jazz kind of is always growing, and it has always grown, and you may not recognize the new thing, but it's still, I think I tend to fall more in line with the second way of thinking. I think truthfully, let me figure out how to best articulate this. I think that a lot of what's happening with jazz right now, I think it might eventually, because I think like there's a lot of hip hop influence in jazz right now. I don't know if truthfully that's making more hip hop fans become jazz fans. I think it's making truthfully more jazz fans become hip hop fans.
Right.
But I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily at all. I just think that really, I think that this is just, we're like in a different, I think it's really like the evolution of like American popular music, less of the evolution of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might just, that to me, that's what I'm just thinking. I think things are changing in American music right now. They're definitely changing in jazz, but I think it might be more of a reflection of what's happening with music in America more than just, and not just in America, but it might not just be like a jazz thing. But I think to me, jazz is not done.
Well, jazz had a pretty good place there for a while in the 40s and 50s in the United States in terms of culture and in terms of popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then it really took a back seat starting in the 60s and 70s. And by the 80s and 90s, it was almost like a museum piece in some ways. I don't mean to say this to insult the musicians, including myself, who are trying to make a living at it, but it was really not part of the conversation for quite some time.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I totally agree with, to me, like the whole thing has been, I take a date to a jazz concert and she whispers in my ear, "Is this good?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Do you like it?" And she says, "Yeah." And I say, "Well, then it's good,"
Right. That's the hardest thing.
Yeah. But no, I totally agree with you in terms of, it's not like, I guess, when my dad was growing up and even my younger or older brothers were growing up, you might say, "What do we do tonight? Let's go hear some jazz." I don't hear that a lot with my friends, around my age. I think, but at the same time, I remember Nat Hintoff telling me about when he was, a young person dealing with people saying jazz is dead. And that was like in the 40s.
Right.
So I remember Jimmy Heath telling me the same thing, and he was like 90.
So this is part of the identity of jazz, this outside kind of almost ready to die but never dying thing.
I think to me the difference between, or the main difference that I see, and I obviously didn't live in any of those eras, so I'm not sure, but I think, among my generation friends and, people who are, early 30s, late 20s, I think there are more preconceived notions around the term jazz than maybe there were before. I feel like basically it's like, I tell someone I like jazz and they say, "I don't like jazz." And I say, "Well, when have you heard jazz?" And then they've never heard it, but they just think that because they associate it with something that they think they must not like it. And often I'll say, "Come to my gig." And then at the end of the gig, they'll say, "I like that, but that's not jazz, is it?" Say, "It is jazz." And they say, "Well, I like that, but I don't like jazz." And it's just a very, weird.
Okay.
It
That's very weird. Do you can we go down that path just a little bit? So here you are, a jazz musician, and I don't know, I'm a jazz musician, so I'm going to take the authority to say that you are a jazz musician. You're welcome. And, and yet, I understand why someone would think what you do isn't jazz, who doesn't know anything about jazz, because jazz now has an association of being difficult listening.
Right.
And even stuff that's, really not consider difficult listening anymore, like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, it still is demanding to listen to. You know,
Yeah.
it's not sit back in your chair music. It's music that insists you, if it's done right, it engages you,
Mhm.
but it engages you in an active way, not a passive way.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I mean, I also think a lot of, one of the other things. I mean, I was pretty frustrated when I used to go to, often frustrated when I'd go to jam sessions in New York, because even though Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and stuff like that is challenging listening, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I always felt like it was kind of like, it was kind of like in like Ahmad Jamal is a perfect example of this. It's kind of like, let's start with the melody we love and let's make it even more beautiful. And I'd often go to these jam sessions today, and it was kind of like, that was not it. It was more like, guess what song I'm playing. And to me, that was always a little frustrating because, it was kind of like, like in a way, like this strange, like curse of Coltrane or Miles Davis. And I love them both, but like, there were so many saxophone players that I knew who, didn't know that he started off playing rhythm and blues, and, start with Love Supreme, and you're not going to get what he got if you start there. Similarly with Miles, it was cool when Miles would play and his back was towards the audience, but not when you're not Miles Davis, and it would turn people off to the music. And, I'd often hear people say, well, putting down the audience versus putting down the music. And but you're not Miles Davis.
Right.
And I'm not trying to put anyone down at all. It's always just, I always feel like when jazz is presented the right way, or not the right way, but in a thoughtful way, people will like the music. It's just about getting people to be exposed to it in that, in a way that will turn them on. Not like selling out the music, just, I know the music, people like the music when they hear it without the preconceived notions attached to it. If that kind of makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
And this brings us to a good place for a segue. We can talk about your work to further get people to listen to music, including Naranana. What is Naranana?
Oh yeah, speaking of preconceived notions of or Jewish music, but basically, so for the past 10 years, there's existed the Atlanta Jewish Music Festival here in Atlanta, and I took over as executive director about 2 years ago. And to me, the previous iteration of the festival defined Jewish music as a Jewish person playing music. It was really a showcase for Jewish performers, which is great. But as a musician, as a Jewish person who's a musician, I was always kind of questioning that, and not just questioning that, but questioning really what is Jewish music. And I realized, when I took on the job, a lot of people, potential funders or supporters or audience or anything, a lot of them would tell me they were confused about what Jewish music is. So I was thinking, I'll figure this thing out. And, I asked 200 people the question and get 200 different answers. And it's a fascinating thing. It's, one person will tell me it's anything, in Hebrew, and I'd find a Johnny Cash band that sings in Hebrew, or like, anything based on the Old Testament. And I'd say to that person, well, so half of gospel music? And they'd say, no. So we'll have, or anything from Israel. And I'd say, well, here's a band. Listen to this. If you didn't know it's from Israel, you just think it's Taylor Swift copy band. So it's really tricky to define. But my takeaway was that the Jewish part of the music, first of all, if your preconceived notion is that Jewish music is klezmer music, which is most people's preconceived notion, they're going to type in online, when's the next klezmer concert coming to town? No one's typing in when's the next Jewish music concert coming to town. So that kind of lit off a little light bulb. And to me, my takeaway was that the Jewish part of the music is not the music. It's the story about the music. I actually talked to Wynton Marsalis about this one time. And he said, what's the name of your festival? I said, Atlanta Jewish Music Festival. He said, Jewish music, fascinating. Not really a thing, but all over American music. I said, exactly. And so to me, if the story's the defining part is what defines the Jewishness of the music, to me, that really makes whatever we're presenting not Jewish music, but really Jewish contributions to music. And so I feel like most of my job until we became Naranana, which I'll get to, has been, hey, I run the Atlanta Jewish Music Festival. It's not what you think it is. Please meet with me. I think to many non-Jews, they think this is religious music specifically for Jews. It felt very exclusive. And to me, music's for everyone, even if there's a Jewish, component to it. And I think to many Jewish people, they thought it was the klezmer festival, and they didn't want to go to the klezmer festival. But truthfully, I brought in Bill Charlotte to play music on Bernstein, and that wasn't either of those things. So we needed a name that better reflected what we did, that didn't, that was more inclusive. The word Naranana comes from Hava Nagila, which is like the big Jewish song of celebration, but it means come, let's sing together. So I think it's not only more reflective of, the audience we're trying to attract, but also just Jewish contributions to music in general. You can't talk about, Harold Arlen without talking about, a non-Jew. There's just so much. If we look at American music, it's not just and the Jewish contributions to it. It's not always just a Jewish contribution. It's they're American stories with a Jewish component to them. If that makes, and I can give you.
It does. Well, I mean, what I've found interesting about Jewish music and its contribution to the United States is that if you grow up Jewish, there are unfortunately very few opportunities to make what I consider to be quality music. You can be a cantor, and if you're good at being a cantor, you can make good music that way. But there are plenty of people who are cantors who really aren't. They don't even consider themselves musicians. They're just singing through the chants, and typically the audience, the congregation doesn't care that much how good the music is in synagogue. And so unless you go to a synagogue with a tradition of really good music, there's really nothing for you as a Jewish person. It's not like the church. So a lot of these Jewish people who had musical talent, and this goes back 150, 200 years, they had to go somewhere else to do their music. So they became Jewish musicians who wrote White Christmas.
Oh, totally.
And A Christmas Song, both written by Jewish people.
Oh, yeah. Easter Parade. I mean,
right. Irving
yeah.
Berlin and, Mel Torme and, Barbra Streisand, and you get all these people, who become musicians. They're still very Jewish people, but they bring their Jewishness into the music rather than Jewish music into America. It's kind of what I.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, and I get a lot of this from Ben Sidran, who's kind of like my hero in this world. And, a lot of these Jewish composers who moved to America, people like Irving Berlin, they would always say they were American first. They'd always say that their Judaism has nothing to do with it. And, Ben would always say, what's more Jewish than saying your Judaism has nothing to do with it? It's just kind of great.
That's too Jewish a joke. No one's going to get that except you and
me. But the thing that I've noticed with a lot of that music is that there actually is a Jewish element to a lot of it. And it's a term that Ben calls like songs that are, quote, longing for belonging. Like Take Me Out to the Ball Game is a great example. It's basically this guy's working for Irving Berlin. Albert von Tilzer, he was Jewish.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and he had never been to a baseball game in his life, but read an article about baseball in a New York Yiddish newspaper. And he liked the article so much, he would take me out to the ball game. And that song, kind of like White Christmas, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, it kind of, there's like this observer quality. Like, they're here and they see it, but they're not quite a part of it. There's like, Ben also talks to me about like, Jews they wanted to be insiders, but they were really outsiders, which kind of made them like the ultimate insider. And I think a lot of these Jewish composed songs, you'll see it's like, these are songs looking for community, and they really reflect that these composers came from places where they weren't citizens. And, they weren't, a lot of anti-Semitic tropes are like that Jews came to America to control America, but that's not true. They just were looking to belong somewhere. And you can really hear that in a lot of the music, I think.
And maybe this speaks somewhat to the very interesting connection between Jewish people and jazz, which is hard to get at, but it's really in there. I guess maybe that's why I gravitated to jazz, because in a sense that music is a music that also wants to belong and never quite can,
Oh yeah, I've talked to so many musicians, Jewish musicians, who basically, their life journey has been, they were raised Jewish. They found in jazz or blues what they thought they would find in Judaism. They actually grew up feeling like they were somehow related to these Black musicians on record. And then years later, they come back and find the thing in Judaism that they realize it was there all along. But it took the whole journey to get back.
Oh, I want you to say more about that, because I didn't quite understand.
Oh, yeah. So basically, like, I think, and I don't mean to keep quoting Ben, but I think He's a great example. He told me that he had his bar mitzvah, and he was basically just reading words that he didn't understand. Then he came home and put on this record that I think he said his uncle got him for his bar mitzvah, which was a Horace Silver record, and that was kind of like his real bar mitzvah. And he goes through his life he's always Jewish. He's but I remember he said a pivotal moment in his life was going to his son's bar mitzvah, and he said that and it was all about the music. He's singing these prayers, these Jewish prayers, and it's not the words that are hitting him emotionally, it's the sound of the words, because the sound of the music, because saying this melody that he hasn't sang in so long makes him feel like he's standing next to his dad or his grandpa, and it's almost like the words aren't even important. It's the melody that's really connects us. If
which is exactly what's what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. Right? You were talking about your connection to the melody that you played, and how that's the most important thing, and the people that you love, that's the most important thing, the melody. And not only the melody, but someone like Errol Garner he's not just showing off, he's connecting to the audience. That's what I love about him. He's using the melody and the swing to connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, that's what's so special. It's not I feel like in jazz school it was kind of like play the melody, and then here's the chords of the melody, and here are the only notes you can use to improvise on that. And I remember telling that to one of these people who've become like a mentor to me, and they were like, what? That is not it at all. I mean, it is, but I remember what it was. It was in school, I was assigned to write a melody over a series of chord changes. And I remember the melody I liked, one of the notes clashed with the chord. It was basically like, playing like an F minor, and I want to play the major third. And I remember what do I do? I'm going to get a bad grade if I put the major third here, but I like the melody. And I called Les McCann, and he just said, man, you need to go work on a farm for a little while. Said, what do you mean? And he says, you need to learn that this doesn't matter. If you hear it, it's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all the melody.
Yeah. Well, if you communicate it, it's good. If you have something to say and it reaches someone.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's tremendous. And I love that you can call Les McCann and ask him for all of us. That's just
But yeah, I think his thing was, and I've heard this from a lot of, older musicians who did not get to go to a jazz school, is like Les could feel at what I was saying that I was starting to doubt what I was actually hearing in my head. And he's not saying that there was any value to what I was hearing in my head, but he's saying there's nothing illegitimate. There's nothing wrong with you hearing that note. That's what you hear. So deal with that versus approaching it as, I must be wrong if I'm hearing this.
Well, in defense, I don't want to have a bunch of jazz pedagogues, calling me and telling me, we've ruined jazz pedagogy. These people have come up with, over decades ways to teach jazz, and a lot of great ways to teach are by limiting the possibilities for students so that they can do well and feel comfortable. So I don't think either of us are bashing, the idea of let's just stick to this. That's how I teach in True Mute, just starting with the pentatonic scale.
Oh, totally. And I would teach the same. I think it was just basically like the next level was, I remember and I'm not bashing any of that. I think it's important.
Yeah. You can't stop there. You can't stop there. That's not what we're doing it for. We're not learning the music in order to learn what mode we can play over giant steps.
Yeah, it's really, you're learning it so you can eventually play whatever you're hearing in your head. Yes. To me, just one other thing was that, and this is more where I'm kind of trying to get at with this. I'm really not trying to sound down on anything because I think it's all good. But I remember when I first met Les, he was very serious about taking me on as as a mentee or whatever. And he said, if you want to do this, like you need to write a song a day for a month. I was like, okay. And he says, but none of the songs can be written at the piano. And I was like, what? And he says, and I was like, why? He's like, you'll figure it out. And if you don't, I'll tell you. But I figured it out. And it was basically, he later expressed this, was basically, if you start composing at the piano, the first thing your brain thinks is, what can my fingers do? Versus if you're just sitting in your car and start humming, you're not thinking that. You're really singing what's in your head. And so he basically likes it more where it's like, you find out the melody, then you got to figure out how to make your fingers do that. Versus, I can only do this stuff, so I'm limited to what I can compose, if that kind of makes sense. didn't want me to doubt my ear.
That's terrific advice. I love that.
Hmm.
So you're 30 years old, is that correct?
I'm almost 32.
Almost 30. Oh, so old. Okay.
Actually.
32. But what I'm saying the opposite. You've had such a wonderful life so far. You've done so many things. What if I had done all the things you had done? I'd be say, I'm done. That's great. What's next?
Well, I thankfully recorded a live album at Birdland right before the pandemic, and I'm lucky I did it because it was pretty much, do you want to record this? And I don't know. And then I said, actually, let's do it. So thankfully I did that. So
Yeah.
I'm working on putting that out. So hopefully that'll be out by the spring. I'm really excited about that.
Where can we find it?
Well, that's a great question. I'm working on that, but it will be called Live at Birdland, and it should be, once it's out, which I don't have the date yet, it'll be on all the things, Spotify and music, Apple Music, and all that stuff. And
Okay.
there'll be a physical component too. But I'm working on that, and I've been practicing singing. I want to become a better singer. That's something that's I've been a little bit nervous about.
Yeah. I know a really good music school if you're interested.
Yes. Nice. And they're working on the festival, and I'm just trying to do everything. I mean, I like so many things, so it's hard to.
Well, where do you see yourself in 20 years when you're my age?
That's a good question. Truthfully, I don't mean this to sound like a cop out, but but I feel like when I was 20, I remember I said, well, these are my goals. These are my goals. And then what would happen is something else would come up, and I would just say yes to it. And then now 10 years later, I'm in a different place than I thought I would be when I was 20, but I'm so happy that I'm where I am versus having turned down something because it may have been closer in line with what I wanted when I was 20. Yeah. So I don't mean this as a cop out, but really to me, what I've kind of seen as my thing is, and what's worked for me is to just work really hard and say yes to the good stuff that seems appealing when it pops up and see where it leads. So, I mean, obviously to me, the piano is my favorite thing in the world. I would love to be playing more performing arts centers, and, I mean, we're not doing anything right now, but right. One day more, performing arts centers and stuff like that would be a goal. But really, I just like to work hard and see what happens and, say yes to the good stuff.
Well, that's a great attitude. That's very instructive to me. I really appreciate you saying that. I tend to be an overplanner, and I just love that, you've been able to do what you've been able to do just by staying awake, paying attention, and working hard.
I've been doing my best.
Yeah. Well, before we go, please tell us where we can find out more about you. You have a website?
Yeah. So I got a website. I got joealtermanmusic.com. I'm also on all the social media stuff, just at Joe Alterman, and under the same name on, iTunes or Spotify or YouTube, wherever you want to listen.
And how do you spell Neranenah?
Oh, great question.
I'm not spelling it.
Neranenah. Think of Phenomena, the Muppets.
That doesn't help at all. Nobody knows how to spell that.
Actually, sorry, not for the spelling, for the pronunciation.
Thanks. Okay, we'll talk to you next time. Ladies and gentlemen, no.
Good question.
The director of the festival You Can't Spell.
My bad. Don't think of Phenomena.
Well, Joe Alterman, thank you so much. It really has been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking to you over the years, but this interview has been real special for me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's always a treat to talk to you. Thank you for having me. Seriously.
My pleasure. And thank you all, folks, for joining in. We really appreciate you checking in with us. We love that our subscriber numbers are going up. Please keep liking our videos, checking us out, and let people know that you like what you're seeing here. We're looking forward to interview. We got some other people lined up. I can't wait to share them with you. Miss Jen Litwin. She's going to talk about opera, and she's going to talk about her work in the financial industry, this strange combination of both. And Larissa Gosla, also our songwriter, one of Brie Noble's people. So thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time.